Some childhoods do not end, they simply fade quietly, like a light left on too long, until no one remembers when it first dimmed. There are children who learned the weight of responsibility before they learned how to play, who understood silence before laughter, who became observant not out of curiosity, but necessity. They were praised for being mature, yet no one asked what had been lost in the process. Their calm felt impressive, their independence admirable, but beneath it lived a quiet exhaustion, the kind that settles deep and stays unnamed. Growing up too fast does not always look like trauma. Sometimes it looks like strength. Sometimes it sounds like wisdom. And sometimes it becomes invisible even to the one carrying it. This is not a story about broken childhoods. It is about the unseen psychology of children who had to become adults before they were ready. There is often no single moment when childhood ends, no clear line where play turns into responsibility. Instead, it arrives gradually, disguised as awareness. It begins when a child notices what others miss, the change in tone when voices lower, the pause before a door closes, the way adults carry tension without naming it. At first, it feels like curiosity, but soon, it becomes something else. The child learns to read rooms before entering them, learns to listen not just to words, but to what hangs beneath them. They sense when something is wrong, even if no one says it aloud. This awareness is not taught, it is absorbed. A child growing up too fast often becomes quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because silence feels safer. They learn that asking questions creates discomfort, that expressing needs may be met with distraction, dismissal, or absence. So instead, they observe, they watch adults carefully. They learn patterns, they begin predicting moods, anticipating reactions, adjusting themselves accordingly. What looks like emotional intelligence is often emotional vigilance. These children are praised early. You're so mature, you understand things beyond your age, you're easy, but ease is not the same as peace. Behind the calm exterior is a nervous system that never fully rests, a mind always scanning, a heart that learned to stay composed because breaking down felt inconvenient or dangerous. In this early awareness, innocence does not shatter dramatically. It thins. The child still laughs, still dreams, still imagines, but alongside those moments lives a quiet responsibility, one that says, someone needs to be steady, and somehow, that someone becomes them. Sometimes, the awareness comes from emotional absence, a parent physically present but emotionally unreachable. A household where feelings are minimized or ignored. A space where the child learns to self-soothe not as growth, but as necessity. Sometimes it comes from chaos, unpredictability, arguments without resolution, promises that dissolve quietly. The child does not analyze these conditions. They adapt to them. They begin to regulate others before regulating themselves. They become helpers, listeners, mediators. They shrink their needs to make room for the environment. And in doing so, something subtle happens. The child learns that safety comes from control, from being prepared, from not needing too much. They grow comfortable being the strong one, even when strength was never asked for, only assumed. This early awareness often goes unnoticed because it does not disrupt. It does not demand attention. It blends seamlessly into functionality. Teachers admire it. Relatives trust it. Adults lean on it. No one pauses to ask why a child understands so much so soon. And the child rarely asks either, because by the time awareness forms, it already feels normal. It feels like identity. They believe this is simply who they are, thoughtful, responsible, emotionally contained. They do not recognize it as adaptation. They see it as personality. What is rarely acknowledged is the cost. The cost of always being alert, of holding emotional weight without language for it, of learning to prioritize stability over expression. The child grows older, but the awareness stays. It sharpens, it matures, it becomes the lens through which the world is viewed. Trust is measured, rest is conditional. Joy is permitted only when everything else feels under control. This is how growing up too fast begins, not with loss, but with perception. A child sees too clearly, too early, and once that awareness exists, it cannot be undone. It follows them quietly into adulthood, shaping relationships, boundaries, self, not as a memory, but as a way of being. The early awareness does not announce itself as harm. It presents itself as competence, and because of that, it often goes unexamined, lingering beneath the surface, waiting for a moment when it is finally seen, not as strength alone, but as survival. No child decides to grow up early. It happens in response to something missing, or something overwhelming. The origins are rarely dramatic. More often, they are subtle, layered into daily life until they feel indistinguishable from normalcy. Sometimes, it begins with emotional absence, a parent who provides food, shelter, routine, but not presence. Conversations stay practical. Feelings remain unexplored. Comfort is implied, not offered. The child learns quickly that emotions have nowhere to land, so they stop reaching outward and turn inward instead. They learn to calm themselves, to reason through confusion alone, to become emotionally self-sufficient long before they are ready. This self-sufficiency is mistaken for independence. But independence born too early is often rooted in necessity, not choice. In other homes, the origin is instability, raised voices, unpredictable moods, shifting rules that change without explanation. In these environments, children learn that safety is temporary, that peace must be maintained, that someone must stay alert, so they do. They learn to read emotional whether the way others read clocks. They sense when tension is building and instinctively adjust, becoming quieter, helpful, agreeable. They believe that if they can just behave correctly, the environment will settle. This belief stays with them. In some families, the child grows up alongside emotional dependency. A parent leans too heavily, shares too much, confides in ways that blur boundaries. The child becomes a listener before becoming a child, a supporter before being supported. They learn to manage adult emotions without ever being taught how to manage their own. This is not always abuse. Often, it is exhaustion passed down, pain without processing, love without capacity, but the impact remains. The child internalizes responsibility for emotional balance. They begin to feel that their role is to stabilize others, even at the cost of themselves. And sometimes, the pressure is quieter still. Expectations without words. A family that praises resilience, but never softness. That values achievement over expression. That celebrates composure while discouraging vulnerability. The child understands what is rewarded, what is safe to show, what must be hidden, so they adapt. They become capable early, reliable, low-maintenance. They learn not to ask for too much, because they sense there is little room. None of this requires malicious intent. Most children who grow up too fast are loved. They are cared for. They are wanted, but love alone does not meet emotional needs when adults themselves are overwhelmed, distracted, or unhealed. The child absorbs what is available and fills in the gaps themselves. They become the missing structure, the emotional glue, the quiet anchor. Over time, this role solidifies. Responsibility becomes identity. Maturity becomes safety. Being needed becomes proof of worth. And because these children are often praised for their adaptability, no one notices the weight accumulating inside them. No one asks what they had to give up to become this way. Play becomes secondary. Spontaneity feels risky. Rest feels undeserved. The child grows into adolescence, carrying an invisible resume of emotional labor. Have learned how to hold things together, but not how to let themselves fall apart. And the origin story fades, not erased, but normalized. They do not remember a moment when they were asked to grow up, only that they always seemed to know how. The environment shaped them quietly, repeatedly, relentlessly, not through force, but through absence, not through instruction, but through necessity. This is where growing up too fast begins, not with trauma that can be named easily, but with needs that were never met loudly enough to be seen. And what begins as adaptation slowly becomes architecture, shaping how the child understands love, safety, and their place in the world, long before they are aware that something was missing at all. Psychology often names what childhood could not explain. What once felt like personality, calm, responsible, composed, reveals itself as adaptation when examined closely. One of the most common mechanisms behind premature maturity is parentification. This occurs when a child takes on roles meant for adults, emotionally, practically, or both. They become caretakers of moods, managers of conflict, sources of stability, that the child does not perceive this as a role. It feels like duty. Their nervous system adapts to responsibility early. They learn to suppress their own needs to maintain order. Their sense of value becomes linked to usefulness. Over time, emotional attunement becomes survival. Another adaptation is emotional suppression. Children who grow up too fast often learn that expressing fear, sadness, or confusion creates discomfort in others or in the environment itself. So those emotions are quietly tucked away. The child still feels deeply, but they feel privately. This suppression is not numbness. It is containment. The mind prioritizes stability over expression. Emotions are processed internally, without support, without language. And because children lack the tools to integrate complex feelings, those emotions remain stored, unprocessed, unresolved. This is how emotional intelligence becomes confused with emotional labor. The child learns to recognize emotions in others with precision. They can name sadness before tears fall, anger before voices rise, but they struggle to identify their own needs with the same clarity. Their inner world becomes secondary. Another key adaptation is hyperindependence. Reliance feels risky when support has been inconsistent, so the child learns to do everything alone. Asking for help feels unnatural. Receiving care feels uncomfortable. Trust becomes conditional. Hyperindependence is often praised in adulthood. It looks like strength. It sounds like confidence. But psychologically, it is often a response to early unpredictability, a belief that safety comes from self-reliance alone. The nervous system remains alert, prepared, braced. Rest becomes something to earn, not something to trust. These adaptations create a specific internal landscape. The child becomes highly capable, but emotionally guarded, insightful, but disconnected from their own vulnerability, reliable, but quietly exhausted. Because these patterns form early, they become identity. The adult does not think, "I learned to be this way." They think, "This is who I am." Psychologically, this is known as egosyntonic adaptation, when survival strategies feel natural rather than imposed. The mind forgets their origin. What remains is the pattern: a tendency to stay composed during crisis, difficulty relaxing when things are calm, a constant low-level tension that feels familiar. Neuroscience helps explain this. Early environments shape the nervous system's baseline. Children who grow up too fast often develop heightened sensitivity to threat, not necessarily danger, but emotional disruption. Their systems learn to stay prepared. This is not pathology, it is efficiency. But efficiency carries cost. Over time, the body forgets how to stand down. The mind struggles with stillness. The heart remains guarded, even in safe spaces. And because these individuals often function well, excel, even their internal strain remains unseen. They do not collapse. They endure. The psychology of premature maturity is not about damage. It is about trade-offs. What was gained was resilience, insight, adaptability. What was postponed was rest, play, dependency. The child learned how to survive, but not how to feel held. And that distinction becomes more visible later in life, when external stability no longer explains internal unrest, when strength begins to feel heavy, when independence begins to feel lonely. The mind begins to sense what childhood could not articulate, that growing up too fast was not a gift, but a response. And understanding this is not about blame. It is about context. It is about seeing that the traits once admired were shaped by conditions, not chosen freely, and, once seen clearly, they can finally be held with compassion rather than expectation. From the outside, nothing appears wrong. The adult who grew up too fast is often competent, composed, and dependable. They manage responsibilities with ease. They navigate crises calmly. They are the person others trust when things fall apart. Yet beneath this, functionality lives a quiet conflict, a contradiction that is difficult to explain, even to oneself. There is strength, but also fatigue, control, but also longing, independence, but a persistent sense of being emotionally alone. The inner world feels busy, but oddly empty. This conflict does not announce itself loudly. It hums. It shows up in subtle ways. An inability to fully relax, even in safe environments. A discomfort with being taken care of. A feeling of restlessness when life slows down, because stillness invites feeling, and feeling was once unsafe. The adult may struggle with emotional intimacy, not because they do not desire it, but because closeness activates old patterns. To be close means to be seen. To be seen means to be needed. And being needed once required self-erasure. So they remain guarded even when they crave connection. They give support easily. They receive it awkwardly. This imbalance creates quiet resentment, not toward others, but toward the self. Why is it so hard to ask for help? Why does vulnerability feel like weakness? Why does exhaustion feel normal? The mind does not have clear answers, only habits. Another tension emerges around control. Early responsibility taught them that stability must be maintained, that chaos must be managed, that emotions must be regulated, especially others. So they become planners, problem solvers, fixers. They struggle when things feel uncertain or emotionally unpredictable, not because they lack resilience, but because unpredictability once required constant vigilance that the nervous system remembers. This inner conflict often creates identity confusion. They are praised for being strong, yet feel secretly fragile. They are admired for independence, yet crave rest. They are seen as reliable, yet feel unseen. There is grief here, though it is rarely named. Grief for the softness that was postponed, for the permission to be small, for the version of self that did not have to hold everything together. This grief does not always feel like sadness. Often, it feels like emptiness, or irritability, or numbness sometimes. It feels like guilt for wanting more care than feels justified. The adult may dismiss their own pain. Others had it worse. Nothing truly terrible happened. They survived. But survival is not the same as being held. This dismissal keeps the conflict alive, because the psyche does not measure pain comparatively. It measures it in terms of unmet needs, and needs delayed do not disappear. They wait. The inner child, though rarely acknowledged, still exists. Beneath the adult's competence, they surface in moments of overwhelm. In sudden emotional floods, in unexplained withdrawal, the adult feels confused by their own reactions. Why does a small disappointment feel heavy? Why does criticism cut deeply? Why does rest feel uncomfortable? Because the system learned early that worth came from contribution, from composure, from being okay. Anything that threatens that identity feels destabilizing. So the conflict continues. The adult maintains functionality while quietly longing for release. They hold themselves to high standards while secretly wishing someone would say, "You can rest now." This tension is exhausting because it is invisible. There is no clear problem to fix, no obvious wound to tend, only a persistent sense of carrying more than seems necessary. The quiet inner conflict is not a flaw. It is the echo of adaptation, a reminder that strength was once a requirement, not a choice. And until this conflict is acknowledged, it continues to shape relationships and emotional availability, not as failure, but as unfinished processing. Waiting for a moment when awareness finally creates space for something different. Recognition rarely arrives dramatically. There is no single memory that suddenly explains everything. No clear revelation that rewrites the past. Instead, it unfolds slowly through language, reflection, or exhaustion. The adult begins to notice patterns, the constant readiness, the difficulty resting, the tendency to minimize personal needs. What once felt like personality begins to feel repetitive. They encounter a phrase, a story, a description that resonates too deeply to ignore. Grew up too fast. The words linger. At first, there is resistance. They tell themselves nothing was wrong, that childhood was fine, that others had it worse. But the body responds differently. Something tight loosens. Something unnamed feels seen. Recognition is unsettling because it reframes identity. Strength is no longer just strength. Independence is no longer just preference. Emotional control is no longer just maturity. They begin to see these traits as responses. And with that realization comes grief. Not explosive grief, quiet grief. The kind that sits in the chest and has no clear direction. Grief for moments missed. For care never asked for softness delayed indefinitely. This grief does not blame caregivers or rewrite history. It simply acknowledges impact. Recognition allows complexity. A parent can be loving and limited. A childhood can be functional and emotionally insufficient. A person can be resilient and wounded simultaneously. This duality is difficult to hold at first. The mind wants simplicity. The nervous system wants clarity. But recognition requires sitting with contradiction. The adult begins to notice how often they stay strong when they want to rest. How often they offer understanding without asking for it in return. How often they manage emotions rather than experience them. These observations are not judgments. They are revelations. Recognition does not immediately heal. It destabilizes, because when an old identity loosens, something else must take its place, and that space can feel frightening. Who am I without this strength? What remains if I stop holding everything together? The fear is not of weakness. It is of unfamiliarity. The psyche has relied on these adaptations for safety. Letting them go feels risky, but recognition also brings relief. A sense that the exhaustion had a reason, that the restlessness was not random, that the inner conflict was not a personal failure. Understanding creates permission. Permission to question old patterns. Permission to feel sadness without justification. Permission to acknowledge needs without shame. The adult may begin to feel emotions more vividly, sometimes uncomfortably so. Tears come unexpectedly. Anger surfaces without clear cause. Joy feels fragile. This is not regression. It is release. Emotions once contained, now have language. Experiences once normalized, now have context. Recognition shifts the internal narrative. Instead of "I am too much," the story becomes "I carried too much." Instead of "I don't need help," it becomes "I never had it consistently." Instead of "This is just how I am," it becomes "This is how I adapted." This shift is subtle, but profound. It marks the first moment where the past is seen clearly, not through blame or nostalgia, but through understanding. Recognition is not an ending. It is an opening. It does not erase old patterns, but it softens their grip. It invites curiosity instead of criticism, compassion instead of dismissal. And in that space, something new becomes possible, not transformation yet, but gentleness, a willingness to approach the self with the same care once reserved for everyone else. Recognition is the moment when survival begins to loosen its hold. Not because it was wrong, but because it is no longer required. Healing, for those who grew up too fast, does not begin with change. It begins with permission. Permission to pause. Permission to feel. Permission to not be needed. This stage is often misunderstood because nothing is visibly broken. Life may be stable. Relationships may exist. Responsibilities may be met, yet inside, something is tired in a way sleep alone cannot fix. Learning to feel safe is not about undoing strength. It is about expanding capacity. The nervous system that learned to stay alert does not relax simply because life improves. It needs evidence, repetition, gentleness, safety. For these individuals was once conditional. It depended on behavior. on composure, on usefulness, so unconditional safety feels unfamiliar. Rest can trigger guilt. Stillness can bring unease. Receiving care can feel intrusive. The body does not yet trust that nothing will be demanded in return. This is why healing often feels slow, not because resistance is conscious, but because the system learned early that letting go was risky. To feel safe now requires re-education, not through logic, but through experience. Small moments where nothing goes wrong when needs are expressed. Quiet pauses where nothing collapses when control loosens. Relationships where presence does not depend on performance. These moments may feel insignificant, but they accumulate. The individual begins to notice subtle shifts. Breathing deepens, muscles soften, thoughts slow. They may notice discomfort too, because when vigilance fades, buried emotions rise. Sadness, once postponed, finds space. Anger, once redirected, seeks acknowledgement. Longing, once ignored, becomes audible. This is not regression. It is integration. The psyche is catching up on what it did not have time for before. Learning to feel safe also involves redefining worth. No longer based solely on reliability or strength, but on existence. This can feel destabilizing, because identity was once built around contribution, around being the one who holds everything together. Letting go of that role may feel like disappearing, but safety allows a new truth to emerge. That presence is enough. That rest is allowed. That softness does not erase competence. The individual may begin to notice how often they anticipate others' needs before their own, how quickly they move to fix rather than feel, how reflexively they minimize their own discomfort. These observations are not instructions to change. They are invitations to notice. And noticing is powerful, because it interrupts autopilot. Learning to feel safe is not about forcing vulnerability. It is about allowing it when it arises, not about dismantling boundaries, but about softening rigidity. The goal is not to become dependent. It is to become connected. To learn that support can coexist with autonomy. That strength can include rest. That maturity can include play. Play, especially, often feels foreign. Unstructured time, joy without purpose, moments without outcome. For those who grew up too fast, play was often postponed indefinitely. Reintroducing it feels awkward, even childish. But play is not regression. It is regulation. It teaches the nervous system that safety can exist without vigilance. Healing is rarely linear. Some days feel lighter, others feel heavy without explanation. Old patterns resurface under stress. Control tightens when uncertainty appears. This does not mean failure. It means the system is learning. Learning to feel safe is a long conversation between past and present. A dialogue that says, you are not needed in the same way anymore. You do not have to hold everything alone. You can rest without consequence. Over time, the message begins to land, not all at once, but enough, and in that safety, something gentle unfolds. Not a new self, but a fuller one that includes strength and softness, awareness and ease, capability and care. What remains after growing up too fast is not emptiness. It is texture, layers of understanding that formed early, sensitivity to nuance, an ability to hold complexity without collapsing under it. These are not wounds, they are imprints, but they are no longer required to be carried alone. The child who once learned to observe quietly still exists, but they no longer have to stay alert. The adult can look back without judgment, not to rewrite the past, but to acknowledge it. There is no need to reclaim a lost childhood fully. Time does not move backward. What can be reclaimed is permission. Permission to feel without function, to rest without justification, to be held without earning it. Those who grew up too fast often carry a deep sense of responsibility, not just for others, but for meaning itself. They ask questions early. They notice inconsistencies. They seek coherence. This depth can feel isolating, but it is also a gift when paired with safety. Because depth without safety is weight. Depth with safety becomes wisdom. What remains is discernment. an ability to see beneath surfaces, to understand unspoken emotions, to navigate complexity with compassion. These traits do not disappear when healing begins, they soften. They become choices rather than reflexes. The individual no longer needs to be the strongest person in the room. They can choose when to lead and when to rest. They no longer confuse control with care or responsibility with love. They begin to trust that presence is enough. There is grief that lingers gently, not as bitterness, but as acknowledgement. Grief for moments when no one noticed the weight being carried, for the version of self that learned to be quiet too soon. This grief does not demand resolution, it simply asks to be held, and it can be held now, because the adult has language, awareness, choice. What remains is the ability to nurture the self that once adapted silently, to offer compassion retroactively, to say, you did what you had to do, and to release the expectation to continue doing it forever. Those who grew up too fast often fear softness will erase their strength, but strength does not disappear when it is no longer needed constantly. It rests, and rested strength is different. It is less rigid, more generous, less reactive. It knows when to act and when to let things be. In time, the nervous system learns that safety is not something to maintain, but something to inhabit. Moments of peace no longer feel suspicious. Joy no longer requires permission. Connection no longer feels like a burden. This is not a perfect ending. Old patterns may whisper. Fatigue may return. Awareness may deepen. But now, there is space. Space to choose differently. To feel fully. To exist without constant self-monitoring. What remains is not the loss of childhood, but the expansion of self. A life that holds both the seriousness learned early and the softness discovered later. A self that no longer has to grow up, only to live. And in that living, the child who once grew up too fast finally finds what was never missing, but simply delayed: safety, presence, and permission to be